Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Warcraft news. So, it's an interesting one today because this is the first time we've seen the WoW team talk about patch 8.3. And there's a lot to get into, some agreeable, some disagreeable. Fundamentally, it's just nice to see Ian sit down and chat. Plus, there's some hints at the Shadowlands beta ETA and the team's reactions to our reactions to the end cinematic. First though, two things. On the game dev side, our studio site is updated if you want more info, and also on a direct line about the game, then sign up to our mailing list. It is there. Then also for Patreon, it is Orc and Shaman month. It is a massive way to support our channel. You get the big Orc art set plus the Shaman pin. Now that said, the pin is actually delayed a bit. The coronavirus has actually shut down manufacturing. Don't worry though, everything else ships in time, and we will be getting pins fulfilled as soon as is humanly possible. It's like priority number one for us. So that's what's up there, and let's get into the news. Alright, so first up, the big Ian Has a Coasters interview. This kind of came out of nowhere. It's weird. Blizzard tend to be a bit more, traditional game website focused, like with their outside of BlizzCon interviews. So, yeah, seeing a community site like, like Warcraft Radio get this was actually really nice to see. And you know what? They did a great interview. Ian seemed really just chilled out, relaxed. It was a really good interview. I think more communication like that is exactly what we need. And that does kind of remind me, what's happened to the Q&As with Ian and Josh? I mean, look, I get it, they weren't perfect with some of the quality of the questions, but, the absence has been notable, especially, around 8.3. So as such, this Race to World First focused interview is actually our first glimpse at the team's post-launch patch 8.3 thoughts. And that does mean it's very interesting because it does cover a number of pretty hot button topics. And for me, I'd say there's good things, there's bad things. It's overall very interesting. I think Ian had some great admissions, some really good moments of honesty, and just saying about what they need to do to level up, which was lovely to hear, and also some thoughts on the corrupted system and some other things. So we're just going to start off with corruption. Here's the quote. Overall, we are happy with how corruption is playing out. Now, while that's their overall thought, Ian did admit that there were tuning issues and are some tuning issues right now, and that some corruptions have overshadowed others. Now, he did say that, what they like about it is how it's made gearing choices interesting and deeper. So that's what they sort of think about how it's played out. Now, you and I may be thinking about raid bots in response to that, and seemingly Ian was as well, and this is what he said about that. He said, one of the challenges is a section of the community still needing to adapt and get past the pure simcraft-driven mindset that has dominated for the last couple of years. And then he went on to talk about how, pure sims don't capture real-world situations, don't really take them into account perfectly. So look, I'd say that some of those things are literally true, but I also think it's a very weak answer, and I think it does paint with a very broad brush, and isn't really that helpful, and I will respond to it in a bit, but first, I just also want to say that the team likes seeing people running different corruptions for different fights, and they enjoy seeing how people are tweaking their gear and managing their corruption budget and really just interacting with that system. And then finally, their balance goal is to have throughput per corruption point be balanced, which, right now, it ain't. So broadly, I'll say this. I strongly disagree with a lot of what Ian said, and personally, I've been incredibly lucky with my gear. I've got Echoing Void, Appendage, Infinite Stars with a socket, Gushing Wound, and I actually can use most of them at once. Here's the thing, I don't feel like I earned any of them, right? They were just random things that my character was given. And while large DPS numbers are nice to see in the bars, I don't feel like I'm responsible for them, and yeah, that's the core of it there. I actually don't feel like I've got that much ownership over my character's performance because, yeah, it's so much of it is just from corrupted gear, so I just don't really feel like, it feels less engaging to me, I guess. So I guess that's like me feeling a lack of player agency, and apparently cleansing gear is supposed to be like player agency, but I'd always feel like if I did that, I'd just be hurting my options in the long run. Amongst my guild, the system is pretty much reviled, and I actually suspect part of that is because of how overpowered and therefore impactful it is. Now, Ian did talk about the tuning issues, and I'd say yes, but I'd also say, how did you let this system ship with that balance? You must have known beforehand. In my opinion, corruption should be, across the board, like 25% as powerful as it is now. I just think that right now, it is too large of a portion of your character's output. I think that having so much of your result be dependent on the external RNG stuff that's given to your character, I think that takes agency away from players. Ian talked about, liking to see people be playing around with a corruption budget, and, I actually get that. But I'd also say this, that's a useless metric on their end. Of course people are going to be doing that because that's literally the only way to play the game. It's kind of like thinking that people enjoy commuting to work on highways because lots of people do it. In reality, they pretty much all hate commuting to work on highways, but they do it because they've got to. In this case, yeah, you're going to have participation in all those things because that's just how the game is set up. Now, Ian talking about Sims was strange. I mean, look, Ian, all due respect, can you, off the top of your head, work out which one of the two critical strike corruptions is best, and at what item level and what tier, and with what azurite, with what essences, and with what talents? Come on, it's just not human readable. Now, I'd say what is human readable is maybe Twilight Devastation for AoE, Infinite Stars for single target, but that's not what most of the corruptions that you guys made, that's not what they are. Take Gushing Wounds. How do you know if that's better than some more crit, or some more versatility, or, reduced cooldowns? I mean, guys, I'm sorry, but your game is absurdly complex, and I only bother engaging deeply with your gearing systems and, tweaking my character a lot because I can actually offload the thinking to a sim, and then I can make decisions based on that data, and that's how I'm able to do that. So overall, I'd say that the commentary for The Sims, I think the way that it felt, I'm not saying this is how it was, but I think it felt a little disrespectful, a little out of touch with the player's experience, and a sort of convenient way to not talk about the game's complexity. Which is unfortunate. I mean, just look at the Ian Hazzikostas quotes Twitter account. It is beyond funny. There are quotes from, past Q&As where, they're talking about making gearing more simple. They're talking about making item levels a reliable indicator of power and a bit of gear. I mean, in the 8.3 reveal, Ian said that Titan Forging's removal would be better for the correlation of, item level and gear source and gear power. I mean, man, I love listening to Ian. I love his interviews. I love hearing him talk about game development. I love how he's explaining his ideas. But some of that stuff, it's just not true. You guys keep on saying this stuff, and then when it comes to the game, the literal opposite of your stated goals is what actually appears. That's kind of what happened with loads of corruption. I mean, there's still situations where a 420 World Quest ring with corruption is better than a 460 bit from a heroic rate. I guess, it's just I hear Ian talk about being broadly happy with corruption and then not really talk about any of these sort of details, and I just lose a bit of hope. It just feels really disconnected from World of Warcraft. This stuff is Diablo. It's Path of Exile. I don't think it's World of Warcraft. Now, to be fair to them, yes, some of the agency problems will be aided in Shadowlands with, say, the weekly chests, giving players, a choice between multiple items, and maybe if corruption existed but you had a choice in your weekly box, you'd feel a bit better about it, but still, I think that the fundamentals here are really worth keeping in mind. Now, scope-wise, this is the good news. Ian was very clear that corruption is a 8.3 system for the ny'alotha theme, and that it is not the future of gearing in the game. That said, he did say that they were happy with how the experiment has played out, especially the thematic side of it, and that it's, just let them explore gearing in a world without Titan Forging. And I mean, I'd say, yes, that's fair enough. I actually do agree with him on it being thematically strong, and in some cases, actually being fun to play around with. And yeah, whenever you can marry theme and mechanics, that's always what you want to do, and it's great. But I just think, as a game mechanic, elements of this have, in reality, missed the mark a little bit. Now, we're going to go far deeper into corrupted gear in a video in the very near future in our just our WoW feedback series, so more on that later. And of course, the survey from our last video, that is still open should you want to respond, and I'll be revealing, how people responded to the corrupted gear in the upcoming video, so stay tuned for that. And alright, with that done, let's talk about ratings. So bugs suck, we all agree, so did Blizzard. On ny'alotha, the 25% shield, that actually came up because an or statement was actually an and statement, meaning that yes, the trigger triggered twice. That is, a bit embarrassing. It is just the type of thing that sometimes happens when you're dealing with code. Just wasn't caught in QA. Of course, that's not ideal, but there you go. That's what happened. For Raden's bug, they said that yes, that was a big problem, but they let it stand after limits kill for that reset, because basically doing that is how to keep the race fair, and I very much agree with him in that one. And overall, Ian did admit that the bug situation could have been a bit better, and that, a large viewership really did put more of a spotlight on them, and that things like that, have regularly happened in the past. It's just that now people see it a lot more. Now, he was also very clear that he does not view that as an excuse. So, overall, it's clear that Blizzard are aware that it's a problem, and that they know that this larger viewership means they're going to have to do a bit better in the future. So, that was totally good to hear. Another thing that I really liked hearing, actually, was Ian saying that WoW is not an esport, and that it's not constructed to be an esport, and that the Race to World First is a community event. I just couldn't agree with Ian more in this one. I think that, making moves towards making the Race to World First like a perfect esport and, the balance there, I think that'll be damaging to WoW as an MMO. And I think that, the Race to World First should be a community event. So that was really good to hear. And then next up, actually, in terms of community communication, it was really good and really interesting. So Ian said that Blizzard have been slow to adapt. And he said this, and this is a quote, "Our live support, community support, all of that just needs to level up. We just don't have the structure in place historically to treat a raid opening this way." And he then went on to say that they're working on staffing changes behind the scenes so they can do better in that area in the future. And that was great. I love hearing that type of raw honesty from a dev. And just, hats off to Ian. Great. And overall, community engagement's been a bit of a weak spot for the WoW team as opposed to a lot of other live games. So in the context of the Race to World First, them doing better there is a really good thing. I would just hope that whatever changes Ian was referring to there are able to, reverberate a little bit more into the general handling of the game. If I think about, say, the patch 8.3 PTR, giving feedback on that PTR was really challenging because Blizzard basically never explained their intent with a lot of the specifics, and things would just change from build to build. Testers didn't really know why or what was final, what's placeholder, and that just meant that actually giving good quality feedback, which we really do want to do, that it just wasn't really that possible to do. So whatever those changes are, I think they really need to apply more broadly to a lot of the rest of the game as well. All right, moving on, we've got the ending of ny'alotha. So Ian said that it was not a cost-saving measure, that it was purely a creative decision to do it that way, and that their goal was to do the opposite of what they did with Deathwing, to actually show your character doing it. He said that overall the team is satisfied with how it panned out, how ny'alotha turned out, and that at the end of the day, it's an MMO, bosses are there to be killed, and, there'll be other ones to move on to. Now, on him saying that latter point, I really do think that was a bit of, just reductio ad absurdum, right? It's like, was anyone really making that point? It seems like an odd defense, just not that relevant, so that was a bit weird. But as for the rest, he did acknowledge, right, that many players just sort of felt, oh, that was it, and that they have taken that community feedback on board, which is fair enough and really good to hear. I'd say this, if it was a creative decision, then yes, I think it is one that didn't really pay off for them. I think that, they think those in-game cutscenes look a lot better than they actually do. Just look at the Final Fantasy XIV in-game ones. It's a bad comparison for WoW. On the points of people talking about budget and laziness, he said that felt rather cynical, and I can totally understand how, him as the leader of the team would feel that those are very cynical criticisms, but I would say, A, well, it is literally cheaper to not do a pre-rendered thing, and B, I think what matters is how you make people feel. So if something feels rushed or cheap, it actually doesn't really matter that much in terms of delivering to your customers whether they were rushed or cheap. What actually matters is, did you, achieve your desired results with your target audience? And in this case, I don't really think they did, and I think it's a case of accepting reality and dealing with it. And then finally, and I think a bit more broadly here, what I'd say to Blizzard as a way of explaining the reactions is that past expansion and cinematics have foreshadowed future events visually, right? So you had Archimonde deal with Gul'dan, you had Sargeras stabbing the planet and all the ramifications of that, and then the 7.3.5 epilogue cinematics. The Sargeras one was such a big moment. That really got people excited for what was going to happen in the world of Warcraft because it was such a crazy thing. With this, there really was not that much. Now, this patch does have hints in it for the future. I've got lore videos out of it, but at the end of the day, right, those big, exciting events that are done through a really bombastic cutscene, that's what Blizzard does well, and they didn't really do that here, so that bit's unfortunate. I think that's actually the lion's share of, the reason why people didn't really feel that connected to the end cinematic and maybe didn't really enjoy it. Ian did say that, he very much regretted how a lot of people experienced it outside of the game, and I think that's an interesting point, but at the end of the day, it didn't really do anything interesting for the game world, right? For the state of the world of Warcraft. So whether someone's like, oh, wow, look at my character go or not, I think that same criticism of feeling, oh, is that it? I think that's still actually going to be there. And then just quickly moving on in terms of some other things, Ian said that he was happy about the pacing of raid tiers in this expansion. I'd actually agree with him that. I think about 6 months is pretty much spot on. And when talking about Shadowlands, he said that there would be more to talk about in the very near future and that he is excited to share what the team have been working on and what's in store for Shadowlands pretty soon. So yes, the time words that he said were very near future and pretty soon. That means we're probably getting close to alpha, and you know what? That's going to be exciting. everything rides in Shadowlands. I think you know what I think there. I think you know that we are going to be going as hard on this testing process as we ever have. We are, we just dropped like 400 quid on setups for SurveyMonkey and a whole bunch of stuff so that we can like properly go deep into soliciting your feedback and trying to empower, you as much as possible so that together we can all give them as much feedback as we can. All that I would say is Blizzard, we're going to try really hard. I would love it if you just communicated your intent with some of your systems a little bit more, because that would make it so much easier to give targeted feedback. There's just, I do like this, I don't like this. It would be nicer for us to be able to say, I think this does achieve your stated goal, or maybe it doesn't. I think that's where the feedback really needs to be, and that's why we need to see that communication. And then finally for today's video, we've got WoW Classic. So, Phase 3, it is out, and if you'd like to hear about the original patch 1.6, then here's our episode on it, and yes, that series is complete now, so you can check it out. I think one curious thing about this phase release is that Blizzard are putting a lot into it. They're actually doing a 50% off new WoW subscriptions, I suppose in a bid to just get more players involved. They also did a very nice trailer, so there's that, and the promotion ends on the 24th of this month. Now, Classic is very important to Blizzard, though it was very interesting hearing them say during their recent earnings call that Classic retention was actually strongest in the East. Now, given that Eastern MMOs are, just a bit more grindy in their nature, I wonder, right, if maybe that Western audience has just been conditioned towards just more sort of fast-paced instant gratification stuff, and that's maybe a part of why retention would be weaker in the West as opposed to the East. Certainly an interesting situation, and we do know that Classic's strength is such that subs at the end of 2019 were actually at double the level they were just after patch 8.2 came out. So that does show you that Classic has the potential to be a humongous driver of growth for World of Warcraft, and they're certainly doing what they probably should do, feeding that as hard as they can. And there's actually another really good thing about this. So way back, right, when, we were first talking about Classic coming out, a lot of people were sort of thinking, okay, so are they going to use Classic's phase release to basically compensate for the live games content cycle? I think this is a pretty clear case of no, right? Like 8.3 just came out. There's going to be a pretty large, dearth of content. If they were trying to tactically spread out the Classic releases, they probably would have delayed this a little bit more. So I think it is very interesting that they seem to be treating Classic like its own product. And I think that really is a good thing, because it means that, when they're dealing with WoW Classic, they are doing what's best for the Classic players, or at least that's the goal. I've certainly heard rumblings from parts of the Classic community that there's not, there's maybe some dissatisfaction there with some of how Blizzard have handled the rollout. But anyway, I suppose that's what's going on. It doesn't seem like they're just saving up Classic for droughts in live World of Warcraft. And that said, with Classic, like, after this, they're going to have quite a lot in terms of releases, like Anchorage, that's going to be major. Naxxramas is going to be really major too. Nax, it was cleared by so few guilds that it really, I think for a lot of people, will feel like new content once it actually releases. Most people who play Classic did not get to Nax, right? So even if they've been on a nostalgia trip all the way up through to Cthulhu, by the time Nax comes out, it actually probably will feel like big, fresh content, and I've got to imagine that will bring a lot of people there. But of course, it's all about what that follow-up is then after that, and I suppose BlizzCon 2020 is probably going to be the place to find out about that. But yeah, anyway, that's it for the WoW news. Apologies for not being as fired up as usual today. I've got a flu, so yeah. I've got a flu and a hangover, if I'm being honest, so you know what it's like. But yeah, it's a fun one. Certainly with that Ian interview, it's interesting, right? When I sit down and I kind of go through what he said and I'm offering my counterpoints, it does feel quite, it feels pretty targeted. Feels pretty, just a bit hardcore, doesn't it? And it's kind of interesting. It's like, I really enjoyed listening to that interview, and I really enjoy just, Ian going through his thought process and things and all of that. I guess it's just one of those things where, yeah, the WoW team, they often say they're going to do stuff in interviews, and then the opposite happens. Or, like that answer with, just players need to sort of get with the program when it comes to Sims, that I think was just a little bit, it's one of those things, right, where I'm always hesitant to go too hard on people for the answers that they give in situations like this. And I know that you could just sort of say like, it's off the cuff, so therefore it's honest and true. And I totally do understand that perspective. I think that is basically how it is. But I also do think that a lot of the time, if our mission is to, get a job done and communicate ideas, there are sometimes instances where you know, just more time to sit down, reflect, and prepare is probably a good thing. So it's like when I'm thinking forward to the future of what I want to see from World of Warcraft developer communications, is it really the Q&As that Ian and Josh did? I mean, you just need to go and look at the Ian Has a Ghostess Quotes Twitter account to see that that clearly did not work out for them, right? And I've got to wonder if, you know, they see what they're actually doing in the game, and then they think back to the interviews that Ian's given, and then they just kind of think, oh dear, we actually did the opposite of what the boss said over there. Like, you know, item level mattering more than other things, which that's not how, it ain't how it be. It's the opposite of that right now. So I've got to wonder if maybe just instances like that are what have made them not do the Q&As. I mean, not doing Q&As around the 8.3 launch seems a little bit weird. Yeah. I think that's the most important thing for the team to do, honestly. It's communication. I think that them being communicative is really the way that we're going to be able to create, you know, a more positive, helpful thing where, you know, even if there's people like me who do disagree with a lot of stuff, but, you know, I want to help them. I want to know what they want to do with the game. I want them to be able to, you know, just communicate clearly their intent. So just more comms to help that. I think that is the most important thing going on there. And they did recently have another community manager, you know, job post for the WoW team. So I'd hope that getting more staff in there, you know, helps, right? You know, from what I understand, Josh is he's a busy boy from what I think's going on, because, you know, there were people were booted off his team, and it's only now that we're seeing, you know, job listings for that team. It's not like the amount of work he will have had to have done will have decreased, right? So, yeah, it seems like some of those structural issues are maybe what have been holding them back in comms. But, yeah, I mean, that's what I think. I think that's the most important thing. I'd love to know what you think down below, though. And, yeah, stay tuned for the big corrupted gear video. That is just a part of how we're trying to, you know, I mean, just me communicate what I think, but also try to solicit your opinions and stuff like that. So, yeah, cheers. Let me know what you think about all these topics down below, and I will see you next time.